This is the city of Jerusalem. Jerusalem is a mile-high city like Denver, Colorado is. And as you look there, you see the Mosque of Omar setting in the back end there. And that's the Golden Dome. And this is the Muslim mosque that was built after the temple was destroyed in Jesus' day in 70 A.D. And we're standing on one side of a mountain looking over into the old city of Jerusalem. This is across the Kidron Valley. That valley that's in the front of you is the Kidron Valley there. And this city, of course, is the capital of Israel today. And it's a lot like Cincinnati. It's just up one hill and down the other, or up one mountain and down the other. These walls are the original walls of the city of Jerusalem. These walls are 14 foot high and 20 feet thick. And this is the light shining on them at night. This is St. Stephen's Gate. This is the gate, one of the 8 gates that leads into Israel. And this is reason it's called St. Stephen's Gate. They believe in the book of Acts that this was the gate that Stephen was drugged out of and finally stoned to death. And so they call it St. Stephen's Gate. This is one of the gates that was one of the 8 gates, and this is called the gate of Joppa, the Joppa gate, for it leads down to Joppa. And these are the women dressed in their Arab costumes that are there buying wares of this. This is inside of the walls of Old Jerusalem, and this is some of the Arabs that are standing there, part of the Palestinian, or PLO that we call them, part of the Arabs. And they had been out in the sun so long that their skin had actually burnt black to where they was as black as a black man would be. This is one of the other gates leading into the city there. And this is a couple of Arabs walking out, and some of the Americans was walking out there with them. But this is one of the gates, and you can see how thick they are going into the old city. This is the new city around outside of the new city of Jerusalem. And the reason I walked up here, I walked about a mile up this hill at this stop sign to stop long enough to see. They had told me that the buses and the cars had 666 on their license plates. And so I wanted to make sure that they did. And they were half true. All of the Israeli cars and buses and taxi cabs, the first 3 letters is 666. All of the Arab cars, they just have regular license plate numbers as we do. But all of the Israeli cars, all the government cars, has 666. This is about a mile from the hotel that I was staying in. You can see Jerusalem in the background there. This is one of my friends, the camel, and you can, for $2, you can ride this camel around in a circle, and you can feel how the camel rides. This is our bus that we traveled in. The dark-complected man is our Arab guide. He's born and raised in Jerusalem and has been a guide since he was 12 years old. This is another city. This is another picture of the new city, and the building on the left of you there, the tall building. I kept wondering every morning when I walked by there what that was, and I kept taking pictures of it. And finally, the third day when I walked by there and taking pictures and everything, found out it was a police station. It's a wonder they hadn't arrested me thinking I was trying to break in. It was about a mile down to the end of that street there is where our hotel was. This is the city inside of the city walls of Old Jerusalem. This is how narrow the streets are. And they have the archway to keep the buildings from crumbling in an earthquake. They do have earthquakes once in a while over there, and this is to keep the buildings from crumbling. This is the steps as you go up to the Mosque of Omar. And as you can see, these are the tourists from our group. that was there. And this, as we go up to the Mosque of Omar, is the place in which Solomon's temple one day stood, where the Golden Dome is standing now. These are the Muslims that are there, that are worshiping Muhammad, and as you know, they don't turn facing, notice they don't turn facing the mosque, but they turn the opposite way facing Mecca, which was the city of Mecca, where was the place where Muhammad was born, in Mecca. This is inside the Golden Dome, and this rock here is a rock that Abraham offered up Isaac as a sacrifice on. So the Muslims, this is a sacred place to the Muslims, because they were also the sons of Abraham, because Isaac, or Ishmael, was the father of all the Arabs, and Isaac was the father of all the Jews. So both of them had the same father. So Abraham offered up Isaac here upon this rock, and during the time that Jesus was here upon this earth, when the temple stood here, they offered up sacrifices on this rock right then in the temple. This is inside of there, and you see the beautiful workings and the carpet. We had to take off our shoes and leave them on the outside. They wouldn't allow you to walk in there with shoes on, because it's a sacred place. As God told Abraham in the wilderness, take off your shoes, for you're standing on holy ground. And so they believe that this is holy ground, so we had to take off our shoes before we could go in there. So you're looking down upon the rock there, and they have a crevice in the rock where the blood of the animals ran down through the bottom, and they had a hole underneath the rock and a tunnel that took the blood out to the Kidron Valley, which is a valley around the city on the outside, and the blood ran down the Kidron to the Kidron Valley, and there they burnt all the rubbish. This is the top of it. As you can see, it's a beautiful place. This is the foundation of it, and at one time Solomon's temple stood right here where I am standing, and where the temple will stand again one day when the Jews rebuilds the temple. It will stand on this very spot. This is, as you come down from the Muslim temple, this is the footer or the foundation of Solomon's temple. And I found these Jewish children there, and they were singing, and they were playing a guitar and singing there, and they were singing Hebrew psalms, of course. The steps leads back up to the temple that's on top. So we were coming down here, and now we're coming to, this is the area where the wall, the Wailing Wall is. That's the Wailing Wall. The foundation of Solomon's temple, the original foundations, is there. Now you notice the divider that's down the middle of it. Well, they believe in segregation over there. The women goes on this side of that divider and prays, and the men goes on the other side and prays. All your women and men are divided. Even in the temple, the women went up, or synagogue, the women went upstairs and the men goes downstairs. But they're divided. These are the steps that the man is standing there, where that you go down the steps to go out there. This is another group of children that was singing and playing there at the footer of Solomon's temple. This is another scene of the square there. This is the Wailing Wall in the distance there. This is some Jewish men, the rabbis, that are worshiping at the Wailing Wall. This is the Mosque of Omar again, and you see the crowds of people going up and down. Here they are washing their feet before they go into the temple, so they won't defile the temple. They didn't want me to take their pictures, but I went ahead and took them anyway. This is a street inside of the city. You see how narrow they are, that they have to park their trucks off of the main thoroughfare so that people can get by. These two ladies was part of our party that went over. This is on top of Mount Zion, and this is St. Peter's Church. And they found out by excavating that this is the very place where Caiaphas, the high priest's house, was at. To when they arrested Jesus at night and took him to Caiaphas' house, and there they had a trial at midnight and called in the Sanhedrin, and there they found Jesus guilty. They had brought Jesus up these steps here that you see, and they took him down them steps the next morning whenever they took him to Pilate's house. The reason it's called St. Peter's Church, it was there that Peter denied the Lord 3 times. These are olive trees that you see here, and they're still producing today olives. This is another picture of the steps in St. Peter's Church. This is the Golden Gate, or the Eastern Gate, or the Beautiful Gate. All of this is the same gate. And this is where Jesus rode triumphantly through this gate on Good Friday, or on Easter Sunday, or on Good Friday, and Palm Sunday. I'll get it right in a minute. Palm Sunday, he rode triumphantly through on Palm Sunday, and they hailed him king, and then we know that just a week later they turned against him and crucified him. If I could stop long enough and tell you a story about this gate that was real interesting to me. You know that the Muslims doesn't believe in Jesus Christ, but by some chance they closed up this gate after they recaptured the city after 70 A.D., after they had driven the Romans out. And this gate wasn't open and will not be open until Jesus rides back triumphantly through this gate. Twice in our lifetime, in the 1900s, has men that of kings decided to open up this gate, and twice it was always, their plans were always foiled. The first time was in 1918, and the British government was in the war with the Muslims and with the Turks, and so they was in war with Germany also, and so the Turkish government owned this, and there was a king there. The British had invented the tank in then, and they were coming to the walls of these cities where these gates were, and they were made out of wood, and so they would, with the tank, just push them down and go on in. And so the king of this city decided that he would take and open up the eastern gate, for it was the only real steep entrance going into Jerusalem. And they knew that the tanks could not come up this way, so he had his men to get together, and they were going to take and open up this gate. And the next day that they were going to open up this gate, that morning, very early in the morning, there was a British airplane flew over. Well, they had never saw an airplane before in their life, and so they didn't know what it was. And they looked up there, and this big bird in the air, and so they dropped a piece of paper out in a parachute, and the man picked it up and took it to the king, and he had it translated, and it said, "General Allenby of the British Army asked you to surrender." And so whenever the translator translated it, he said, "Allaby demands your surrender," and meaning it was the Son of God that had commanded your surrender. So instead, it made them so frightened they threw down their arms and surrendered. And that was in 1918. And in 1966, whenever King Hussein owned half of Jerusalem and the Jews owned the other half, And so they decided that King Hussein decided he'd open up the eastern gate and build a big hotel right inside these gates. And so he had cleared the land and was getting ready to build. And so he had brought in air hammers and everything to open up the eastern gate. And the morning that they were going to open up the eastern gate started the 6-day war. And they never did get around to open up the eastern gate. And it will not be opened until the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords comes back, riding upon a white horse, as told us in the book of Revelations, and rides victorious through this gate. This is the Church of all nations. The reason it's called the Church of all nations, there's 15 churches put up money to build this church here in the Garden of Gethsemane. This is built right over the rock in which Jesus prayed and sweat, as it was, great drops of blood. And this is the olive trees that was in the garden. And perhaps under these same olive trees was it was there where he prayed, "Not my will, Lord, but thine be done." An olive tree dates back, because an olive tree never dies, and some of these dates back to the time of Christ. Some of them has been cut down, but the root never dies. It comes up from the root each time. And by the way, these trees are over 2,000 years old, and they're still bearing olives today. So that proves to us people never gets too old not to produce. They still can produce. This is inside of the upper room on top of Mount Zion, and this is where the 120 was filled with the Holy Ghost. And as said in the book of Acts, they were all assembled in the upper room, and there appeared unto them cloven tongues of fire, and filled them all that were there. We had a service there. This is a street leading, connecting the two buildings. From the upper room, this is all on top of Mount Zion, and we go over to David's tomb, where David was buried on top of Mount Zion there. And there was these golden crowns were placed upon his tomb, one each year that Israel had been a nation. But the year before I was over there, there had been a young boy slipped in there at night through a window, about an 8-by-8 window, very, very small. But he had slid down there and stole all of these here crowns, and there's no crowns on David's tomb anymore. This is on the street there. You see the man selling bread, and these are called bagos. It's a hard piece of bread with a hard crust, but it's very good. We ate some of it, and it was just delicious. You see the Jewish women there standing to buy their bread for the day. This is Mount Calvary. We are standing in the garden where Jesus was buried, and there in the back you see the place of the skull. You see between the two posts there where it looks like the two eyes and the nose of a man. This is why they called it the place of the skull. It was on top of this hill that 3 crosses stood 2,000 years ago, and there they hung Jesus. And they took him down and took him over to a place in a garden, and there was a tomb hollowed out of the mountain, and there they took him and buried him in the tomb. But he's not there now. We went in and out of the tomb, and we didn't see Jesus there at all, because on that Easter morning he arose. This is us standing at the tomb and going in and out of where Jesus one day did lay, but he's alive forevermore. We went to service there in that in the garden, and on that Sunday morning, and this is part of our crowd that was with us in the garden. and we are about 10 feet from the entrance of the tomb there. This is in the Kidron Valley. This is Absalom's tomb. Absalom was a bad boy. He rose up against his father David and tried to take away the throne. And the one that's on the right is the tomb that Absalom built for himself. And now when the Jews walks by, they spit at the tomb, for Absalom was a bad boy to rise up against his father. This is another tomb to your left, and they're still burying people in there today. This is some of the ground that's around there that you can see how desolate it is. This is on some of the ground and on top of a mountain. We were on top of Jericho. This is some of the fruit down around the Jordan River. It's very fruitful around the Jordan River, and that's some of the different things that we got there. There's some more fruit, and this is in the city of Jericho, and it is very fruitful and very plentiful of all kinds of vegetables, and they have a season there that would be comparable to the one in Florida. It gets cold in the wintertime, never cold enough to freeze anything. This is the walls of Jericho. Whenever Joshua marched around the walls of Jericho and the walls came tumbling down, this is the excavating of the walls of Jericho. We are looking down into the walls of Jericho. You see the white buildings that's in the background there. This is a city of 500 people, PLOs. But during the time of the 6-Day War, they drove all of the Arabs out of this town, and now only about 50 people lives in this town, where one day 500. And I said to our guide, I said, why don't they come back? And he said, why should they come back? They'll just be run out again. This is the hole or the steps leading down to the walls of Jericho that was knocked down. This is some of the buildings or houses that they lived in there in that village, the PLO village. Of course, the PLO is the Palestinian Liberation. And you see what kind of ground that is there. They say that Israel is the promised land, but I'll tell you, I wouldn't trade an acre of Indiana for all of Israel. It's so much different. As you can see, it's very rocky, but down where there's water, as you can see in the background, the green grass is growing and fields are growing in the background there. This is no man's, and these people are still living in tents there along the Jericho Road. And we stopped there to get this picture of these people living there as they did back in the times of Abraham. They're still living that way today. One of the funny things about it, there was several tents there, and one of the funny things about it, they had a TV antenna sticking out the top of the tent. And no electricity within 50 or 60 miles around there. Evidently they used a battery operated or something. This is the mountain a mountain of temptation, in which the devil took Jesus up on to show him all the countries of the world, and said if he would bow down and worship him, that he would make him king of all the earth. This is the road down to Jericho, and this is where the Good Samaritan was going down the road to Jericho, and there he fell among thieves, and nobody would help him. The priests wouldn't help him, and the lawyers wouldn't help him. And finally a Samaritan came along, one that despised the Jews, and stopped and picked him up and poured oil into his wounds and carried him to this spot where there was at that time an inn standing, and he told the innkeeper to keep him, and if he needed any other money, the next time he was there, he would pay for his keep. But the reason that they said the man went from Jerusalem down to Jericho, because Jerusalem is a mile high, and everything after you leave Jericho is downhill. This is some of the land around Jericho there. Very dry. This is the Jordan River. You've heard of the Jordan River, and this is the Jordan River, about the size of Blue River here in width. It's a very small river, but of course whenever the floods come from the mountains, it comes down very rapidly, and this becomes a mile wide in some places during the flood. And whenever Joshua had to cross over to get over to Jericho, this was a flood time, and it was about a mile wide at that time. This is some of the turnips that was being raised in the ground there in Israel along the Jordan River. This is some of the land you can see as it's blocked off in blocks, and there they are irrigating. Them white pipes are irrigation pipes that they're irrigating it. Where there's water, anything will grow. Where there's no water, nothing will grow. As you can see, it's just one mountain, one hill, right after the other. This is cotton that they had grown, and as you can see, they were having cotton pickers out there to pick the cotton. And Israel has some of the greatest cotton in the world. It's a more higher grade of cotton than any that is in the world. They have to irrigate, of course, everything that they've got, they have to irrigate. This is the Jordan River, and we were baptizing in the Jordan River. This is the river that Jesus was baptized by John the Baptist. We had 10 people that we were baptizing in the Jordan River that day. This is another picture of the Jordan River there. You can see the beautiful trees on each side. Where there's water, anything will grow. Here was some fishermen down here that was repairing their boats. And I thought about Peter and John whenever they were fishermen, and no doubt they had a boat like that. Of course, without the gasoline motor that's on the back end of it. But it was a sailboat, and you could see the sail in it. Here they are again, preparing their boat and getting it ready to go out fishing. They had just come in from fishing that day. This is some of the countryside around. You see the goats grazing on these rocks, because I can't see no grass there. It must be eating rocks. But it's very, very hilly. This is Capernaum, where Jesus performed 7 miracles in the city of Capernaum. Jesus' home was in Nazareth, but he went back and taught in the temple, and they rejected Jesus. They wouldn't have anything to do with him. And so he moved his headquarters from Nazareth then down to Capernaum at the Sea of Galilee. And this is one of the temples that he actually preached in during that period of time. This is the Sea of Galilee, and some of the people was out at 6 o'clock in the morning before we started out, and they wanted to say they had waded in the Sea of Galilee, and so there they were out there wading in the Sea of Galilee. This is common sight during around Israel, the camels, and people, you can ride them for $2 a camel, and you can ride that there donkey if you want to. You can ride him for $2. This is the town of Bethany in which Mary and Martha lived, and these were Arab women, and they had just been gone to the mosque and praying, and now they were returning home. They didn't want me to take their pictures and trying to cover their faces, but I snapped them before they. This is the church that's on the right. Is, they say, the very place in which Mary and Martha's house stood with their brother Lazarus. And you remember Lazarus died, and he was buried. And he was buried in the tomb for 4 days. And when Jesus came, they said, "Why, already he's stinky." And he said, "No," he said, "he's just asleep." And so he went and he called him back from the dead. This is a bus that we arrived there on, and you see the city in the back of us there. This is the town of Bethany. This is one of the ladies that lived in the town of Bethany. She had 10 children, and she lived in a house there. And I was coming down the street, and she said, "Would you like to come into my house?" And I said, "I certainly would." She had been working hard, and she had done that washing. Everything is done on the outside. We went inside of the house. The house consisted of a 10 by 10 room. No furniture. This was the only piece of furniture that was there in that entire room. All of the children and her slept on the floor on little mats. And I thought about the scriptures that Jesus said that a friend came to another man during the night and said, "Rise and give me some food and give me some bread." And he said, "I cannot get up because all my children are in bed." And the man kept insisting on him. He said, "You must give me some bread. A friend of mine has come and I have no bread to feed him." And so finally the man got up, and I can just sort of visualize him trying to step over 10 children to get to the door to give the man some bread for the stranger that had come near his way. This was one of our guides there, that American man that was one of our guides that went there. This is some of her 10 children coming out here. You ladies don't have to worry about sweeping out your house or vacuuming it. Or you fellas, you don't have to worry about mowing the grass there, because that's no grass. And as you can see, the dog is going into the house. They have no doors on it. Somebody had found an old iron bed, and it was laying out there in the outside, and evidently they slept outside. This is the tomb in which Lazarus was buried in. 22 steps down to the bottom of that tomb. One of the ladies was coming up out of the tomb, and I had this picture taken, and they believe that this is the original tomb in which Lazarus was buried in. And Jesus stepped to the mouth of the tomb, and he said, "Lazarus, come forth." And after being dead 4 days, he came out of this tomb. And it reminds me of when Jesus gives that great call for all of the saints of God that are sleeping in the earth around the whole world. And he shouts and says, "Come forth." And every one of them that has been sleeping in Christ will rise for that great reunion in the air. This is a girl, possibly could have been the very one that back in Mary's day, for this is the costumes that they wore during the birth of Jesus, Mary Magdalene. And this was a picture of the costume they wore then, and some of them still wears them now. This is the town of Bethlehem, when the shepherds were keeping their sheep by night, and lo, the angel of the Lord appeared into the sky, and the angels of the Lord said, peace be unto you, and for unto you this day is born in the city of David a Savior, which is Christ the King. And so they went to see this great wonder that was happening, for a Savior was going to be born. And this is the Catholic Church built right over the place in which Jesus was born, in Bethlehem of Judea. The little tiny door that is there, that you can see, where in the background there, is the only way that you can enter into the church. You enter into that door, and it's so small that I had to stoop over to get into it. And when you get in, then you get into this great big church on the inside. They have services in this Catholic Church regularly, but it's down in the basement. Down what we call the basement is where Jesus was actually born. And you go down to your right, down some steps, and there you find a place like this, and they believe that Jesus was born here. They believe that the place in the left side of your screen there is where Mary was laying on the ground there whenever she brought to birth Jesus. And then they took him, his father Joseph took him and laid him to the right here into the manger. The black that is on the roof, it looks like paint, but this is soot from the candles over 2,000 years that had been burning night and day, and this is the soot that is on the top of the... And that's the end, back to the beginning again. Told them, damn, a lot of people borrows the money from MasterCard, Charge, or whatever, and then whenever they get back, they repay it by the monthly installments. But it is really a trip. But you were talking a while back about how much that it costs, but this trip here, at I think it was $14.95, but it includes everything. It includes 3 meals a day, $14.75. It includes 3 meals a day in A1 hotels. It includes your flight fare there and back. It includes all the tours that you go on. Nothing is extra. The only thing that you have to figure in on your trip is how much money you want to spend whenever you get over there. But from the time you leave New York City, that is from New York over and back. That price is from New York over and back. But it is really a trip.
And why did they have 3 suits in the car? I thought it was the mark of the beast.
It is. But they don't believe in our Bible, see? They don't believe in our Bible, and they're fulfilling prophecy. They don't know it. They don't know it, but they're just fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, I wouldn't have them 666 in my car.
They're just fulfilling prophecy, and they are not aware of it. But whenever you go in to the Garden of Gethsemane, that was the most beautiful thing in the world. And they have an altar built around the rock in which Jesus prayed inside of the Church of All Nations. And even though that there was probably 300 people in different tour groups coming in there, I just had to go kneel down and spend a little time in prayer to think that this was the rock in which Jesus agonized so much for the sins of the entire world. and finally said, Lord, not my will, but thy will be done. And he could have called it all off right then. But it was right in that, at that spot, in which he really made the decision that he would die for the sins of the world.
And did you go to the place where the devil tempted Jesus?
Yes, that was the Mount of Temptation that I showed you there. And this was, of course, he didn't tempt him only in one place, but he tempted him on top of the mountain there, and he showed him all of the countries of the world. And then they took him on top of the temple, on top of the very high pinnacle of the temple, and said, if you be the Son of God, cast yourself down. And because the scripture said God would give his angels in charge over you, lest you dash your foot against a stone. And Jesus said also, it says, thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God. And so then he had taken him into the wilderness and said, after, of course, at the beginning, and said, turn these stones into bread. And he said, man shall not live by bread alone. So the temptation of Jesus was in various parts of the place, not just in one spot.